Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I think I need to accept some people. Yeah. Thank you very much for responding. Okay, so we're going to start. Hope you have had time to stretch your legs. Let me see if I can put my mic. Okay, so we have the question, what is SAP? And I mean, Joseph gave us a hint. So if we say SAP, the next thing that comes to your mind is ERP. And the question is, what is ERP? How does that whole thing, come to us? E here stands for enterprise. R stands for resources. And P stands for planning. And before I dissect this and explain it, it will be nice to understand the history. But let me leave this explanation for the history. Then when we see, when we read about how SAP came about and some fundamentals about it, then I'm going to come back to breaking down this concept. But the three cardinal things you would find in any of these major ERPs or major softwares like SAP, Dynamics, Oracle, and the rest of them is that they are ERPs. And ERPs have three cardinal three cardinal points or cardinal issues. One is it's enterprise specific. Two, it considers resources, and three, there's a lot of planning. So I'll leave this topic. Let's see briefly what some of the core foundations or core definitions of what it is. Then we'll come back to explaining that. One, SAP stands for, it's an acronym, it's not a word. So one of the ways we know those who are experienced in the industry is you don't use the word SAP, as in pronounce it as a word called SAP. No. In the industry, we don't say SAP. It's an acronym, so we pick the words one by one. So we call it SAP. And SAP stands for Systems 1, Applications 2, and Product 3. So it's a word that carries a lot of meaning. And that meaning is, and of course, there is data processing 4. So 1 is systems, 2 is application, 3 is a product, and 4, there is data processing. And all these are features of what we call ERP. But we're going to come fully into that. We're going to know why SAP is a system, why it's an application, why it's a product, and how it processes data. I think when you understand, when you dissect SAP like this, then it gives you a little bit more insight into what the application is. So first is it's a system. Second is it's an application. Third is it's a product. And fourth is it processes data. Of course, at the end of the day, it's all geared towards making sure that the business makes the best of decisions. Now, just to continue, it is one of the world's leading providers of ERP. So we have used the word again, ERP, helping organizations manage processes across finance, supply chain, HR, procurement, and more. We're getting a picture of what ERP is. So it's an ERP, and one of the functions of ERPs is that, or are, it helps businesses process, it helps organizations manage business processes across different functions. That's why I said I didn't want to define ERP, but from the explanation, you will understand. And these functions are finance, supply chain, ERP, and a whole lot more. We have a whole lot more that this ERP does. Second point is that SAP system consists of fully integrated modules. That's another point you need to take notes. I'm 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 not explaining what ERP is, but I'm using what SAP is to explain what ERP is. So by the time we're done, you will actually understand what an ERP is. So first is we have seen here that you manage business processes across different functions. Secondly, it integrates modules, which is business functions, which covers virtually every aspect of business management. Number 2 points to note about SAP is that, well, it's arguable it's the number one in the ERP market. We have some people say it's Oracle. We have some people say it's, one of these big players. But of course, every ERP has their area of leverage, have the niche that they are very good in, and the niche that other ERPs are better than them. So it's very, very contestable. But yeah, it's one of the probably top threes in the market. Um, The next is it's basically 40 plus years, I believe. Um, and it has existed as a leading global provider of enterprise application solutions. SAP provides products and services for more than 282,000 customers, which again is at the time of preparing this. And it has and those customers are sitting in over 190 countries. So imagine if you're a consultant in SAP, how valuable your skill are, how global you are. Because once you're a consultant in SAP, then you have access to over 190 countries. That's why I think SAP consultants are, it's one of the skills I've seen that opens doors, and it doesn't matter the continent where you are. Once you're on it's one system. So if you understand SAP in a remote location, or any, let's say you are in Liberia and you know how to configure SAP, it says that platform is the same everywhere in the world. So as long as you have a knowledge in it, you can transfer your skills to every other country that uses SAP, or any other company that uses SAP. So it's one platform. So knowledge in that platform has given you access to opportunities because it has a large number of customers, and since it's sitting in a lot of countries. So that's a good point for those who are thinking about coming on board. Out of these customers, 9 out of 10 Fortune 500 customer companies already implemented SAP. This is also a very important point. Fortune 500 companies are the top 500 companies in the world, and 9 out of 10 have implemented an SAP solution. So that means again that a consultant in SAP has opportunities, because I mean it's one of the opportunities are limitless. All right. Now let's look at that bulb moment. But before then, let's break down SAP. From the definition, you can see what an ERP is. So number one, ERP is enterprise resource planning. So enterprise means that it is used by businesses. So an enterprise is, of course, a business, an organization, or any entity that is in the business of providing a goods or a service. That's an enterprise. Resource could be one, human resource; two, IT resource; three, um, every other thing that has to do with making sure that this organization runs properly. So all the definitions of SAP sits under resource. So a resource can be a system, it can be an application, it can be a product, and of course it can be data. So that's just giving you a picture of what resource is in the IT space. It can also be people like your consultants or any other person. So that is what resource is. So in the definition of SAP, you have resources. So a company might need a system, might need application, might need products, not might, may, or can, or will need to make sense to process the data out of all the information is gathering. And of course, you need human being, which are consultant or users. Then you have the last is planning. If you have an enterprise and you have resource, if you don't plan properly, unfortunately, unfortunately that it might lead to the organization not performing well, or probably going into extinction, or not being competitive enough, or even bankrupt. So you see that it's why when we say a system is an ERP, it has these three basic functions. It's used by an enterprise. It involves a lot of resources within that system. So that system is able to um, also support with planning, so support with process improvement, and a whole lot more. But it involves systems, applications, products, data, and a whole lot. And when you have these tools, you need to apply planning. And I think that's one of the basic function of an ERP. It has modules, which we call functions. For example, we have said that it will support business processes. If you take a typical enterprise, they have what we call business functions. One is finance. Every enterprise most likely have, maybe let's focus on the big ones. They have a finance department, people who manage their day-to-day financial transactions. Number two, every large enterprise would actually be doing some form of procurement or supplying. Supply chain is a very broad term, but moving, getting your resources from sourcing it from somewhere else, delivering it to customers are the two cardinals for supply chain. Every organization will have a business function for HRO because you're going to have human beings working there. You need to have a human resource department that manages those human beings and how they work. Of course, there is sales and procurement. So these are business functions that are in an enterprise. So the job of an ERP is to make sure that it uses the resources it has to plan how this business function within an enterprise work. They have to work together. So when the sales or procurement is doing a certain activity, it doesn't do it in silo or with its own system. Every single function within that business can access or see how the procurement team is going about with the activity. So there's this central control on how the business function works. That's the essence of an ERP. In the past, um, procurement would be using a different system, sales would be using a different system, finance would be sitting on Excel. Just like the issue we had with the company we saw we just did a business case with. So one of the ways that one of the ways that you help companies run efficiently and with good planning is to integrate all these functions together, such that once the procurement guy or the procurement team needs anything, they raise a request for it. That request goes to another function, probably somebody within the um, um, procurement team or within the sales team or the warehouse to approve and all that. So that communication between business functions is the strength of an ERP. So you call something an ERP when it can consolidate the function of different business activities within an entity. So I hope that when you want to explain what ERP is, it's simple, right? It's basically about helping organizations manage various business functions and give you that single source of truth or that single view about the business. So you can explain it in the sense that ARP involves an enterprise, and that enterprise has functions. So you can explain finance, supply chain, sales. Secondly, it also involves those functions for it to for you to for them to work together. They need resources, they need applications, they need systems, they need products, they need data, they need human beings. That's where the resource comes in. And of course, for us to better manage functions and resource, we need to plan. And that's where planning comes into play. And this is really, when you talk about ERP, this is the cardinals of for what an ERP is. So don't forget, it involves different business functions. It involves systems, applications, products. It also involves planning. So when you call yourself an ERP consultant, you have these three cardinals, you have these three major definitions in your mind. You are somebody who understands business process. You're somebody who understands system and applications, and you're somebody who understands who can plan, who can use the system to effectively plan effectively. That is who an ERP consultant is, by definition of the word, an ERP. Please, if you have any questions, you can use the chat. I'll pick it up as we move on. So we have a light bulb moment, really. Let's look at the history of SAP. The five guys you see on the screen are the five people that started SAP. For those who are new to SAP, and hopefully we might not go so far because this class probably will be ending very soon. But just for those who are new, these are the five guys that started SAP. And let's look at some history. SAP was founded probably nearly 40 years ago in Germany by a group of former IBM engineers, and you see their names. I don't want to murder the names because these are all German names, but we have Hop, we have Hector, we have Plattner, we have Tachira, and we have Wellen, Wellen Rulter. So these are the five, remarkable people that started SAP. Now, what was the vision? What was the vision then? And how has that impacted the way SAP as a system is? So the vision then was to develop a software package that married, take note, a software package that married a company's diverse business functions together. So in those days, there was a problem. And the problem was that each business function, let's say finance, procurement, HR, each of these business functions were working separately. So we had a finance system somewhere in finance department. Procurement had a procurement software somewhere in procurement department. HR had a payroll somewhere. And these departments were working in silo, they had this siloed approach. Now, you can imagine how difficult it would be if the CEO asks one question. Can you give me our finance status? What will happen? The finance guy will have to call a meeting there will have to be a meeting between finance, procurement, and HR so that they can all bring their individual reports and maybe, do some reconciliation, some adjustments, a whole lot to now give the MD or the CEO what he was asking for. That will take time. And maybe the CEO needs this information to make a decision ASAP. So you can see that it will have taken the CEO, taking them maybe months to really bring all this information together and give the CEO the data he needs to make the decision he needs to make. CEO ASAP. So that was the vision then. The vision then was to come up with an application that would marry all these functions into what we call a single source of truth, such that within a click of a button and within seconds, this CEO can get the information he's looking for because these three applications or these three business functions are integrated, they are married. So whatever finance is doing, HRO that has impact in HRO sees it, but that impact is synchronized. And that's the concept of integration, which we're going to be learning much later when we do the functional work. But this is just giving you a very detailed background of how things were before SAP. The idea was to help companies replace 10 or different business applications running in silos. So you can imagine in a large company like Google or Shell or Coca-Cola. Imagine before they did that Aruto implementation they did, for these big entities, you can imagine how life was. They might probably have procurement will have its own, finance, even finance, you can have 3 or 4 or 5 applications running. There are some companies like that now that they have different systems doing different things within even a department. HRO might have 3 applications, one for payroll, one for recruitment, one for maybe something else. Supply chain will have its own, sales will have their own, So it was crazy. So the plan then was to help companies bring all these processes together into one platform. And they successfully did that. And that's why we're here having this meeting today. Now let's look at the history before we wrap up, and hopefully we'll pick it up in our next session. One is SAP was born in 1972. It was called Arrow 1, and remember Coca-Cola used Arrow 2. So you can see how old the system was. It was followed by Arrow 2 in 1970s. In 1992, Arrow 3 was introduced. This was followed by different, versions of Arrow 3. And it's important you understand this history so you know how the system has evolved. In 2004, we had the arrival of SAP ECC, and ECC 5.0 was introduced to the market, followed by 6.0 in 2005. In 2009, there was an announcement for the SAP Business Suite 7. Customers were excited with this new version of SAP. It was called Business Suite 7 because, of course, we had SAP ECC 7.0. I think that was the end of the ECC version. Then we brought in Business Suite 7. In 2015, SAP introduced what we call S/4HANA, which is the database, which is HANA. We're going to learn about that as we move on. But SAP introduced S/4HANA, which is like a cloud version. From here down was all on-premise. So everything has to sit on a platform in your office. So the database, the server, everything you have to have a physical location, and companies manage their servers themselves. But as at 2015, SAP introduced S/4HANA, which is cloud specific. So it was a cloud version and people could work from everywhere. And, luckily for them, COVID happened in 2020, and that was a big push for people to move their business to the cloud, because those businesses that were still sitting on a remote server or in a physical location, I think that event would have impacted their business very well. So that was one of the major advantages of sitting in the cloud. Then in 2021, we're now in the age of rise, grow, the other concept of the other products of SAP. And of course, we have, I think 2024, 2023, they brought out SAP Joule, which is the AI, one of the AI, I think it's an AI model that supports, S/4HANA. But this is a brief history of SAP. So we're currently on the rise and the grow versions, although we will learn more about the versions because in S4 we have different versions. We have the public cloud, we have the private cloud, and of course, grow and rise are sitting on each of these versions. Now let's see a quote from one of the co-founders of SAP. I think this is quite early. And then he said that I believe that whoever is successful should help ensure that the next generation can be successful too. I think this is one of the major drive for SAP. It's a generational thing, and it's our time, it's our generation, and hopefully we'll push this to the next generation as we move on. This is just showing you market insights for the top three ERPs. It's also, I mean, we can argue it, but these are, I would say, very popular ERPs. We have Oracle, we have SAP, and we have Microsoft. Now, if you're sitting on any of these ERPs, you have a global demand because these ERPs are global ERPs. So these are the top three. This is just for information's sake. We have other ones like Workday, we have Sage, we have QuickBooks, we have a lot of them, but these three are very globally renowned ERPs. And for those who maybe you want to apply for jobs in the future, these are what we call the SAP partners. They're a whole lot more, really, but these are some very known partners. They help businesses, implement SAP. So if a business doesn't want to use their in-house resources to do an implementation, you have to involve a partner. So those partners employ people and use those people to run the implementation for the business. So if you find yourself working in with any of these partners, I mean, kudos to you. It means you have um, an opportunity to be part of those implementation. I don't see KPMG here. Sorry, guys, those are in KPMG here. But I think the big fours are all partners of SAP. I can see EY, I can see PwC. I don't think I can see others. But yeah, all the big fours are part of this. Now, before we go, we want to look at the career path session. It's also a very important session. So people are asking questions, yeah, and the question is really around, I want to have a career in SAP. How do I go about it? What do I do? Is it that lucrative? You know, what is involved and all that. I know a lot of you are asking, but let's take our time, which will be the last part of this session. SAP career path session. So what you can see here is just a very high level. Number one is most people start from junior consultants. When you have learned SAP, your first training, you get a job as a junior consultant. You have some 0 to 2 years experience. You move to a mid-level SAP consultant when you have grown from, if you have experience between 2 to 5 years. You move to a senior SAP consultant when you have an experience between 5 to 8 years. So here you're seeing that it's learning and growth focused for a mid-level skill expansion and client engagement, for senior level leadership and strategic development, for solution architect or project manager, 8 to 12 years architecting solutions and managing teams. Then practice lead and SAP program director, you have over 12 years, thought leadership and strategic influence. Here, you don't configure systems, really. It's really around strategy. Okay, well, just a brief high level. Let's look at the top in demand SAP job roles in the market right now. So first is, of course, SAP consultant. So by consultants here, we mean functional. I think the number one, and in functional, the top is finance. Finance is the highest in demand role within the SAP industry because no company can exist without finance. You can't also exist without, you cannot exist without sales. You cannot exist without material management, which is MM, which is called supply chain. These are core cardinal modules in SAP that you must implement. However, I think to do a full implementation, you probably need more finance consultants than any module. So if you're having two consultants here, you probably would need five because finance is also very broad. Finance has over 7 to 8 core modules within finance, and you need consult. Most times, you don't have a consultant that knows everything, so you still need more people. So SAP consultant is the top in demand role. SAP developers, of course, those within the ABAP space, it's also a high in demand role. SAP project managers. Before you start any project, you need these two. So I think that's also a very good call out. Before you start any SAP project, you need to have a project manager and you need to have BAs. So most times a consultant plays a role of a BA sometimes because they have to also gather requirements, they have to engage. But in this day and age, we have splitted the functional role into two. So we have functional and we have BAs because we have realized that functional consultants do not possess the skill set that BAs have to actually manage project. They are functional consultants are system focused, while BAs are project focused. So in most cases, when you bring a functional consultant to do a BA work, sometimes they don't have the patience. They don't have the what we call skill sets because somebody who has been focused for years just designing system cannot manage the does not have the bandwidth to tolerate some funny attitude of stakeholders. They don't have that. They can lose it on a user who is not acting appropriately. Meanwhile, a BA has been trained to be able to manage stakeholders. So in this day and age, there's a split. But in most times, in most cases, in some projects, you have the functional consultant also doing the work of a BA. But in terms of the top 5 skills, these five. So if you're planning a career, you have to be sitting within these top 5 roles if you want to get into the market pretty fast. So you have to sit either as a functional consultant, as a project manager, as a BA, or as a developer. Every other part are also in demand, but they are also in demand, but the demand is low. I will pick out because, for example, I don't think you need a lot of. I'll always talk about ABAP is a very good space. It also sits with the developer space. But these three, most times, for basis, for example, if you have an in-house administrator, you can upskill this administrator to be a basis consultant. He just needs to learn how to he needs to upskill himself in administration specifically for SAP. So learn about roles, how to give, how to learn out the roles, learn about understanding how to define roles, how to support with things around accesses, how to support with probably migrations, how to support with moving from one environment to fine, let me just summarize it. Environment management, managing the whole ecosystem, managing the environment of SAP and making sure that you work with the technical consultants to make sure that the system is running as it should be and people have access to what they should have access to. So most times these jobs are not high in demand because you don't have a lot of them. I don't think in a typical project you can have a lot of ABAP consultants in a project. No, you know. But these 5 are functional, they are business facing. So you need a lot of them to make sure that the business is successful. But functional PAs and PMs are the top 3 roles that you will most likely see. And when we go into the market, we're going to see how those roles are performing. So if you want to come into SAP, you need to sit and get into the market pretty fast, you need to sit within these three roles. Is that you come in as a functional person, as a BA, or as a PM. But if you have all these three skills, wonderful. I mean, you set yourself in a very good position. Now let's look at the career path really, and I've taken my time to look at this. There's a career path for end users, right? Those who understand how to use the system. And of course, when we say end users, they know they are specific to certain kind of transactions. But a finance end user will probably be, you have end users that can be managing AP processes, AR processes, banking, asset accounting, and all that. So it's also, but this is probably the lowest level in the career path. This is where most people start from. Or you can sit within the business analysis and project management space, which is also very high in demand, where you would be bridging the gap between business needs and SAP solution. The role involves gathering, analyzing requirements, designing process improvements, translating them into system configurations, and all that. Or you can sit at the functional consultant space. Functional consultants, SAP consultant develop and implement the system for business clients. But the functional consultant relies on these guys to give them the requirements they need to design the solution. And these guys rely on these guys to get the requirement they need to give to the functional consultants to design the solution. Why these guys rely on these guys to make sure that whatever has been configured meets technical and administrative requirements. So you see why these four roles are very critical and why they are very high in demand, because they all are interdependent on each other to actually carry out their work. No one is more important, but in the scale of things, these guys, these guys are the drivers. So if you look at the activate methodology, they stay from the beginning to the end, and even more, and the BAs will probably stay more because even when you have gone live. So if you see a typical go live, once project go lives, the number of these people will come down. So when the project starts, they go up. So during go live, the number comes down because you don't need all of them again. Also, these guys, when you go live, these guys come down. When the project starts, their demand is high. But during go live, this one comes down. To administer, maybe you have one administrator or two, or maybe you have one technical guy to make sure that the system is running, depending on the size of the projects, anyways. But definitely, you don't need a lot of people on this side. But this side, when the project starts, it's up. Once the project go live, it's up because when you go live, there is another phase. There is business process improvement, there is user adoption, there is solution assessment. There is a whole lot that happens when the system go live. So you still need, especially this guy, to stay back and make sure stabilization is successful. The PM will probably leave and start looking for the next project to manage. But this guy, that's why you have a lot of BAs in-house. You have a lot of BAs sitting in-house because once you go live, there is another phase of work that the functional consultants will most likely, of course, if it's an implementation team, they will disembark. The technical guys, maybe you have one or two to make sure that system should run as much as possible. But the BAs that have functional experience, would have to stay back to drive post-implementation work. And if you're in finance, you have to stay back to help them do month-end and year-end activities. So there's a whole lot more that needs to happen. That's why BAs are high in demand in this time. And it also points to the type of projects we're having. But we'll explain that as we move on. So that's just giving you some context into career paths. And I think to wrap up this session, we're going to have what we call the market. So we're going to take a trip into the market and we're going to see how these roles are performing. But before then, I want to see if we have any questions. At this point, do we have any questions? Let me see. Okay, we don't have. Okay, so we have here, thanks for the explanation. How can I define SAP as an reliable system that unifies all business functions under a single level, helping? Okay, thank you, Vera, for that definition. That is true. Yeah, you can define SAP like that. And yes, that's a very good way to interpret it. Ofolabi said, I have 2 years experience, SD and PP, and I have opportunity to join a firm as a PMO. Should I continue in the functional capacity or should I explore new opportunities? How can I make the best of it? And what happens when the project ends? What do you advise? Oh, thank you very much, Ofolabi. This is a very practical question. So let me see if I can take it before we do the last bit. I have an opportunity to join a firm as a PMO for the implementation. Should I continue in functional capacity? I think, yeah, it's a very strategic question. PMO also has opportunities because once you sit in PMO roles, project management is a very lucrative role also. And sitting as PMO gives you that opportunity to move into the project space. I will always say that no matter how functional a person is, as you grow, as you develop yourself, you want to leave. At some point, you want to go into project management because you get tired of implementing systems, really. You want to manage others, you want to manage processes. So if you have that opportunity to do that now, and you have the skill sets and the passion to really coordinate things and manage activities, I would advise you go to PMO. Your functional skills will also help you be a better PMO. And from PMO, you can aspire to go into PM, which is a very lucrative space and a very high in demand space. So yes, it's a good career path you're doing. Some of us did functional for a while. We tried to break into PM. It was also difficult. So most of us are sitting as BAs. And from BA, you can move into PM. So if you're moving into PM now, it sounds very much, it's a good opportunity for you. Are there job opportunities as super users? Yeah, so super users sit within the business. So you must have been employed as maybe an accountant or somebody in procurement or sales and all that before you can. So you become a super user when they implement SAP in the company and you choose to present yourself. You choose to take up that responsibility because super users are people that help the end users. So most times, in most cases, you should have been employed as a normal staff or as an operational staff before you can now be a super user. However, in terms of the job market, we don't have a lot of super users because super users are homegrown. They are in-house. They are developed in-house. We have more of consultants. So you can move from being a super user to move from being a consultant, but we don't have a lot of roles as super users. I think we have come to the end of this session. I wanted us to take us through the market, but because I want to make sure we keep to time, what you can do is when you have the time, you go to LinkedIn, search for example, SAP, FICO, or BO roles. You might find very, very interesting job opportunities, but I'll leave it for next week. Next week, when we come, we're going to really go into the market, explore the opportunities we have, and maybe that will motivate some of us to start looking at a particular career path we want to pick. We also have opportunities for super users, but it's a role that it's not so common because, like I said, super users are homegrown. You might have been working in a company as an accountant and they're implementing SAP. You can rise to be a super user, but definitely functional consultants are things we have a lot. Functional consultants, BAs, and project managers and trainers, right? You can see all that within the system. So we're going to be ending here, guys, and I want to say thank you very much. Thank you very much for taking your time to be part of this. Could you touch on in-house consultants? They are taking basis jobs. Yeah, of course. I mean, if you have an in-house administrator who understands the system already, who understands network infrastructure, who understands accesses and user rights already in an existing platform. And take note, most times when people introduce SAP in their company, they are already using a system. They might be using a smaller ERP. So those in-house guys already know administration in some kind of system or software. So yeah, so basis guys, you have it. So that's why the basis side of things is not so in demand because it's also homegrown. It's in-house, like also the super users. Yeah, but let's pick this up next week. Evie, I'd like to talk more about it next week. So let's pick this up. Next week, we're going to continue for those who want to be part of this session because next week it will be a closed session for only those who have subscribed. Please feel free to reach out to me if you want to start your journey being an SAP. If you want to sit between the BA and PM space, why not? You can reach out to me and we'll get that sorted out for you. Um, so this training is a three-phase training. We are starting with the BA or the project space. We'll move into functional and we'll do a little bit of technical training. And if you want to start your journey as an SAP consultant, or you want to move from being a super user to a consultant, or you want to just kickstart your career within this space, which is quite lucrative, I would say, because when you learn SAP, you learn ERPs, not just. And if you check my job, if you check the job I just opened now, you observe that we have people we call ERP specialists. So you see this word ERP. Once you learn SAP, you can apply for this role because SAP is ERP. We'll take our time to explore the opportunities and the roles that this learning will give you opportunities to and take you through the market and how to navigate that. So for now, it's me saying thank you very much, guys, for joining. We will pick up from next session, but it's a journey. Like Lee said, it's a very long journey. We have to take it in phases. We're not rushing, but it's a long journey, and hopefully as you pick this up gradually it will position you for the next phase of your career. For those who want to pick this up, for those who joined, I hope you have learned something today. Thank you very much for joining, and we will continue the journey as we move on. Thank you very much, guys, and do have a very great weekend. Thank you, Joseph. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Anaya. Thank you, guys. Let's pick up next weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joseph.